stare at the target. You don't get that double vision of the front sight. So target focus training, if you really want to see what it should look like with two eyes, if you do with one eye or one hand, just like punch out forward like this, where you can see, look through the sight at the target, you can actually see what you should be seeing with two eyes. So target focusing with one hand is really easy.
And welcome back to the Firearms Nation podcast, and also welcome the nation to a live show again. As I stated earlier this year, late last year, that I'll be doing a lot of live shows. And what I like to do is bring the audience in while I'm interviewing these terrific guests who come onto the show, because it gives a sense of being a part of the interview. And then at the end, if we're very lucky, we can have these guests answer questions that you want to know, answers to what you want to know. So again, thank you all for being here. As I posted in the comments that I cannot read the comments and do the interview at the same time. So just bear with me. Once we are done with the interview, we will start taking questions. So sit tight, enjoy the show with my guest tonight. It is the one, the only Yong Lee. I recently, when I was trying to do all this stuff again, I was looking for clips of stuff, and I came across Yong's interview I did with him probably back in, I think it was 2018. And it was such a success when I put it out there that I said, you know what, I got to bring Yong on for a live stream. So without further ado, here is Yong. Yong, my brother, how are you doing?
Hey, all right. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it very much.
I'm very excited that we're doing this, and we're doing it live. But it's great to see you again. It's been, like I think we were talking about earlier, it's been almost 5 years. I think 4.5 years, a little bit.
Just over
4 years.
four.
Just over 4.
Yeah, December of 2018. So just over.
Okay.
Yeah, about 4 years and a month. Yeah.
And you were down here in Florida, and you're in Idaho right now, correct?
Idaho, in the Boise area.
Awesome. That's like free country. I mean, Florida is free country as well. Yeah,
it's still America here. It's amazing. And the cops here can shoot.
Well, before we get into that and break the internet talking about law enforcement, because that's a hot topic.
Yes.
So you retired. How does it feel to be retired?
I should have done it 2 years earlier. It's awesome. Fantastic. I love it.
And what are you doing for retirement now that you're finally done with, what was it, 30 years of law enforcement?
31. Since I talked to you last, and I retired December 31st of 2018, moved to Idaho in 2019, did some classes, and then continued on, basically having fun shooting USPSA matches, joining the local club 30 minutes away for $45 a year, traveling the country teaching, primarily in the western states, New Mexico, Washington, Idaho, and then some in the East Coast. But very many agencies, actually. I think I counted like 60 agencies that actually joined my classes. And last year in 2022, I took a break. So I didn't teach in 2022. Just wanted to do nothing except just enjoy the life here in Idaho. But this year, I'm going to pick it back up and get right back into teaching primarily law enforcement.
Okay, how come?
I want to give back to people who protect us. And I think there's a lot of unfinished business for me. There's still, I shake my head constantly when I hear things from now that the pistol optics is really picking up in law enforcement. It's caught on like wildfire, like we thought it was going to. But a lot of agencies, I think now are trying to fast track the process, and they're transitioning to the optic pistols without too much forethought and without structured training. And that law enforcement agencies administration is really cheap, so they send a instructor down to a class for a couple of days, and he comes back and he teaches the whole department, sometimes really big department, how to shoot the pistol optics in combatives, and without a lot of experience with it. And I feel like they're shortchanging the officers. This year, I really want to get in there and get people to buy into hiring me to teach their officers, teach their instructors. And I think it'd be very beneficial for them. And for me to grow as an instructor, and also gathering, information about law enforcement and pistol optics by doing these classes to further my education.
Your company, what's the name now of it's still Master Reflex?
Yeah, Master Reflex Shooting Institute. I don't do a lot of advertising because I like my time and retirement, so I do the classes that I like to do, and they come by the way of emails, social media, and agencies usually get a hold of me and want me to do the classes. So that's how it's been for the last 4 years. And this year, I'm going to do some advertising, let people know that I'm actually still here and willing to do the classes. 2021 was really busy for me. Did a lot of classes in California, ended up getting post-certified. I taught for the Santa Rosa Junior College that has a police academy attached to it. And I taught 14 other staff members because they were seeing students come in with optics and they didn't know what to do. So they called me and had me do the class. And now the pistol optics part of their curriculum at the academy. But they still do both. The people still come in with iron sights and optics. So they have to juggle both. So it's pretty challenging for them. But I'll spend some time down there. And I think, for me, it was really rewarding. I had to do a lot of work to get the post-certified as a post-certified instructor. And my class is actually in their system as post-certified pistol red dot optic class for California Post.
With these agencies going to the dot, now, I think I spoke with Keith Garcia about it. I'm not 100% sure if I remember. But anyways, these agencies going to the dot, the biggest liability that I see with it, because first and foremost, everybody wants a dot now. Dots,
yes,
everybody's wish list. It's all over the magazines. It was probably the number one thing at SHOT Show is all these different dots on guns. Now you give a dot to an officer, they're going to have a hard time with just practicing with the gun, because most officers, as you know, aren't out there practicing every day. But with the dot specifically, now they got to learn, one, how to get that presentation, and two, they need that live fire practice in order to watch the dot, or be comfortable with the dot leaving and coming back. How are you seeing this addressed in your training? I mean, I know you can do it, but how are you getting people to do it?
Yeah, it's a challenge, Eric, and I think agencies that actually want to really do right by their officers, they do give them more training, more ammunition, more range time. Like here in Idaho, it's pretty amazing, I thought. Some of these agencies, they train once a week with firearms. Just think about that, once a week. I mean, that is amazing. I noticed that the instructors and some SWAT guys, or both, coming into the class, they're already squared away. So transitioning to the dot is just only really difference is getting them to understand the difference between, front sight focus or dot focus to target focus. That's the big challenge, because you have that long-standing idea of hard front sight focus, squeezing the trigger, and then now I'm telling them that's out the door. You need to focus on the target. So those who have grip, stance, trigger management, everything worked out already, proficient in those, the transition to dot is relatively easy, in my opinion, because I just have to sell the dot. So those officers, like the SWAT officers, high-end instructors, really simple, in my opinion. Like in 2 days, they're doing it. They're doing what, like, let's say a B class will be doing in USPSA. And I think that's really good for a group of people who don't compete. Now, the challenge is people who come in and they don't have their trigger mechanism down. They're still pinning, hearing the click, and slamming. So what I've had to do is do the target focus in conjunction with the trigger management. And what's interesting is they have no choice. If you want to target focus effectively and operate the trigger and transition between multiple targets, which is what I have them do on the move, if you're pinning the trigger, you're not going to hit anything. And you see some frustrated operators and instructors. But once I get them to convince them, once I do a good sales job, and once it clicks, by the end of the second day, they're actually 99% of them, they click, and they're really proficient now with the firearm, not in just a target focus, but in trigger management. They're actually letting go of the pinning and everything, just releasing, prepping, and squeezing, or just rolling the trigger, depending on the distance that you're shooting. So it's no different than what I've been doing in my former department that I retired from, but it's just on a bigger scale. But human beings are human beings, and they tend to do similar things. And, they learn how to shoot from same instructors as probably you and I did, who went to the same classes back in the day, and they just can't let that go. Now, what I've been hearing from other officers and other competitors is that when they go to a lot of these classes, meaning their agency classes and transitioning to the red dot, they're actually being told to focus on the dot. So I think that's really detrimental, detrimental to combatives when you're talking about what happens to the human mind, human brain, when you're fighting with the weapon, especially close up when it's dynamic, bullets are flying. I mean, you're not talking about you're behind cover taking a 50-yard shot. You're talking about, the 3 to 7, 10 yards, moving, being shot at, shooting back. You have to target focus. And I think a lot of these instructors don't know how to do it, how to translate that information. And also, frankly, I think they believe it's too difficult to pull it off. So they go back to the basic training, which is either the front sight or the dot, stare at it, put it on the blurry object, and squeeze the trigger, which is fine if you're doing bullseye. But as soon as prep hits the fan, it's just not going to work. Our brains just do not work that way. There are things that are happening in our brain under extreme stress. It's just not going to work. So I think they're selling their officers really short and putting them in harm's way in some ways.
Do you think that... No, so let me preface this. I saw an interview with Ken Hackathorn, and It was I don't know if you saw this interview where he was talking about red dots. He thinks it's a fad, and he says, he shoots a lot of them. He's got a bunch of guns, and he's been doing it for a while. And, Ken's been an instructor for a long time, been shooting for a long time, and he thinks it's basically a fad. And I know I'm taking liberty with how actually he put it. So, mark those words. But he brought up, the 40 Smith & Wesson, right? The 40, and you've been in law enforcement long enough. The 40 was the gun, or the bullet, I should say, that was the be all end all. It wasn't as powerful as the 45. It gave you more rounds, but it was more powerful than the tiny little 9. And this is coming after the Miami shootout where the 9mm failed them, the previous iterations of 9mm bullets. So the 40 was it. And now, as he said it, show me a department that is still doing 40 Smith & Wesson. So do you think that's going to be the same way with red dots?
I respectfully disagree. I think there's no going back, because the concept of reflex sight has been around since the early 1900s in anti-aircraft weapons. And, the reflexive shooting, when the handgun in combatives came, especially in law enforcement or military, the small little nubs, we may do it with those, and we made the best with what we got. It's amazing if you think about it, what the competitors can do with those little nubs, or even fiber optic, the things that we never thought you could do, and it's all because they learned, their eyes, brain learn to adapt to it. And then even though it's deficient, they learn to be efficient with it. But as you know, some people who are not prone to be really motivated to train a lot, only train when they're told to or when they have to, because, they have to carry the gun for duty or self-defense. And, those people, and you take them to the range and they're barely surviving, what I would call surviving. And then when you put them with Sims, they're all over the place. You can tell right away their index is bad. They don't know where they're pointing their weapon. They don't see the front sight. So they're just thrusting the gun and shooting. So their mind and body has not made a kinesthetic connection between the front sight, rear sight, and your eyes. And some of them will never have, because they have deficiency in their bodies, like vision issues, coordination issues. And when you're training those people, it's hard to diagnose what's going on, why they can't do certain things. And then, so what the instructors end up doing is saying things like smacking them on the back of the head while standing behind them, front sight, squeeze, that kind of stuff, and these things that have been happening for years. There are officers who get that same training for their entire career because they can't qualify, because it's meaningless to them. I can't see the front sight. It doesn't matter how many times you scream at me, front sight, and squeeze the trigger. What I'm going to do is look at the front sight best I can and wait until it doesn't move against the target, and I'm going to slam the trigger and move the whole gun with the hand, finger, everything, right? So the fact that you're trying to get somebody who has those deficiencies with the iron sight, it just doesn't happen. I tried that for 30 years. Well, a little bit less, about 26 years that I taught during the 31 years. And I had a lot of deficiencies that I didn't know why was happening. And it wasn't until I started shooting the dot that I can kind of put it all together. So what I mean by that is, now that the dot is started to become the norm, you can't really go back, because now those officers who are having deficiencies, right off the bat, if it's got to do with their vision, their motor control, or the mind control. So you can get people trained so much faster and get them to hit things that they will never hit before. When I first launched this program for my old department. We started really getting into it, investigating the possibility in 2016. It goes a little farther than that for me in terms of trying to get it in there, but it just didn't have durable optics. But in 2016, we started testing. And we had the entire department of 183 officers shoot the guns. And guess what? There are people who were terrible, all of a sudden are not terrible anymore. You know, they're naturally hitting the target without a lot of effort. And I asked them, what's different? Because I can see what I'm doing. I can see the dot against the target. You know, I can't really focus on the front sight. My eyes just do not allow me to do that. I can't see it. I can't do it if my life depended on it. So they've been resorting to basically just kind of point shooting, you know. But as an instructor, if you really know what you're doing with the dot, you can right away tell what's happening with that student, and you can help them to become really proficient with the firearm. And that's what my former department, Bellevue Police, that's what they're seeing now. Everybody coming in, you know, they're transitioning to the optic really fast. I wanted them to do it in 2 days transition, and the department said no. You know, we don't have that kind of OT money, so do it in 1 day. So my predecessor, Anthony Felder, very good shooter, USPSA shooter as well, and he's the guy. If you've seen the video with Christian Seiler, he's a vlog. I think it was like part 2, where he was at the police range with a big guy with the beard, Anthony Felder. Yeah, that was him. And so that's the range that, you know, I used to train people at. And so he's been doing that since I left in 2018. And first of all, in just talking about scores, you know, the academy, they're pissed off because our officers, some of them are maxing out the score at the academy, which never happened before. And initially they tried to prevent us from using the dot. So our administration, I think our former chief or chief at the time, had to raise hell, and they backed off, and a lot of our new officers to shoot the dot. And I mean, things have really changed in agencies who allow officers to shoot the dot or use the dot and train them properly on it. And I think if you just give them the dot, they'll eventually figure out how to shoot that, but they don't know how to do it in combative situations. That's the problem. And
well, Yong, let me just interrupt, and because you were just saying a whole bunch of stuff there. What I saw,
I'll get me. Sure,
it's fine. But what I saw when I was still an instructor before I got promoted was that people would come out who taken the class, did the transition class. Now they're carrying the gun. They come to quals and they're doing the fishing. Yeah. Right. They're fishing for it, you know, and now they're definitely slower. They're reverting back to staring at the dot as opposed to being target focused. And that's simply because they're not putting in the reps to not only draw the gun, but to get to the range. And, you know, a lot of these places don't have a range and endless amount of manpower and ammunition to constantly let people take classes. So the people who are initiated will go out and seek training. They'll seek training from you, Scott Jedlinski, Modern Samurai, and some of the other people who are doing dot-specific classes, or they'll compete, right? And I tell everybody, you know, go and compete regardless if you're dot or no dot, because that is going to give you weekly or monthly matches to pressure test what you're doing, to learn how to diagnose and fix problems on the spot, and to raise your subconscious skill, like you always talked about, and your general awareness of you know, handling multiple things going on at the same time. So that's always good. But you know, and I know that it's tough to get law enforcement officers to put themselves in that vulnerable position of being, you know, on the stage. so to speak, no pun intended, but it's a stage. Yeah, but you're on stage and people are watching you, which actually nobody cares. That's the trick. But, they're not getting that. So the regular officers are not getting that. So that was always my concern, is that you always preach to them, put the reps in, do the training, take classes or whatever, and they're not going to do it. So that's my concern with the dot. I don't know what the answer is, because I agree with you. Unless you're into vision and doing stuff with your eyes, as you get older, you hit that 40 mark, you start to lose that vision and things change for you. And it becomes harder and harder to see that front sight. And like you said, they just end up point shooting. Once they get the dot, it's like a whole new world to them. So I don't know what the answer is to it. But I know it's a steamrolling effect, and people can say that I'm wrong, but the people are interested in this dot. They see it. It's just like when rifles were coming out to every agency, everybody wanted one. Now everybody wants a dot.
I agree. When it comes to the looking for the dot, predominantly, which gun is that though? Which setup creates that situation the most?
Well, I don't want to put any guns in particular here, but I've seen that the most with this setup. And, people in the comments can tell me if I'm wrong or if they've seen anything different, but it's primarily with a Glock and a Trijicon, the first RMR, not an SRO, but an RMR, which has a very, very small window. And that is probably one of the most robust optics out there, no doubt about it. I just found that for me, in my eyes, that dot was very, very hard to see. And that's what I see most people having the problem with. Is that what you've seen in your classes and your trainings?
Oh, yeah. I mean, probably 75% of the students in my classes have been Glock 17, sometimes 19, but mostly 17 with RMR, either type 1 or type 2, mostly type 2 now. And yes, they do that. So when I see that, and I train with that system a little bit, and I go, man, you guys got to train harder, because, what you didn't know about the Glock with the iron sights is that you have to crank that wrist down and keep it down, because the grip angle is such that if you relax while you're shooting, you go back to the neutral grip, neutral stance of your hand, which is more like if you were to grab a 1911. So then now all of a sudden your front sight is rising. And if you do SIMS training, or if you evaluate a lot of the shootings of police officers with iron sights in the past, under stress, what happens? They usually end up shooting high, because your wrist wants to go into the natural position of pointing. So with the Glock, what I tell those students is you really have to change your brain pattern to accept the fact that you have to crank the wrist down in more of an unnatural way and make that natural. Like Robert Vogel, that's natural for him because he's done it a million times. So if you're going to shoot a Glock, and I tell this to the instructors too, you have to teach them to keep that wrist locked forward, cant it down, and keep it there. Otherwise, you're going to have this. You're going to have one shot to the hip chest, one shot to the face when you double tap. Boom, boom. Because second shot, your wrist start releasing, and then you hit the face. And that was kind of happening in the class that you were in Homestead. There were some who were doing that, right? And RMR makes it worse because it's so small. So small. And I get the, reliability. You want the most reliable. But here's the deal. Those RMRs are really reliable, but if you don't have a good plate system, which I have to actually really cover in my classes too, they fly off or shear off. And many of the plates have either broken or the screws have broken or sheared off in my classes. So yeah, is it really the most reliable system though? That's my question. I get that it is the most reliable optic, but is the whole system most reliable? I don't know. We can debate that, but what I tell them is, if you're going to use that system, you really have to teach your students, keep that wrist locked and forward and down and canted down and keep it there. And then you start seeing the dot a lot easier, quicker. And most people, like I said, almost everybody in my class, because I understand that what's going on there with that system, by the time the second day comes, they're not struggling anymore. They're not shooting high. They're not searching for the dot, and especially after a night of sleep, everything kind of, because your memory consolidates, right? In my class, some of the students, give you an example, Mendocino County, great group of guys, hardworking deputies there. There's, I think, 21 instructors. I did class there twice in 2 years. And, they're real progressive. They're hardworking, progressive, and they really want to get into it, to the red dot. They want to be one of the first, right? Well, they had, I think, 2 or 3 jailers that showed up, and they tell me, I just got my gun issued at the range when I showed up. And I said, what does that mean? I said, it's RMR with Glock 17. It was a Glock 45. They were changing to the Glock 45 as well. So new gun, optic, never shot it before. And you should have seen, especially one of the guys just sweating. And it was October over there, so it was real chilly. It was like 45 degrees. He was sweating profusely. And at the end of the day, he says, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not finding it. And I said, hey, go ahead and get a good night's sleep. Just relax, come back. We're going to revisit everything the second day. By the end of the second day, you're going to be just as proficient with it as everybody else. And guess what? At the end of the second day, he's proficient as everybody else. During the little steel shoot-off, he was keeping up with everybody. He was middle of the road. He was not the bottom. He was about the middle. So those people who really excelled in the beginning, sometimes they get overconfident. And second day, they're not really learning as much. The ones who really try to apply the knowledge, and by the second day, they're really getting it. And they're not doing that anymore. It's actually pretty amazing. So I get it. There's no easy answer to what some people say. Some people say, yeah, these cops are lazy. They're not going to get it. But you're not giving them a chance. I think if you have them rise to the challenge, and there's no other option, you're going to do this. They tend to rise to the challenge, and I believe everybody could do it. There's, I think, this whole time, I haven't had one instructor not be able to do it. And my old department, former department, Bellevue, I think there's only one guy who refused to do it. And he kept his iron sights. And then he quit and left the department anyway. So, he was one of those naysayers, didn't want to do it. He didn't want to even try it. I had one of my best friends, longtime instructor, SWAT officer, bomb squad, bomb tech, sergeant, really squared away with weapons, but he has some eye issue. He goes, Young, I see 3 dots. I cannot shoot a pistol optic. I have stigmatism that's worse than anybody I know. I can't do it. I'm going to have to bow out of this. I said, yeah, it's okay. You can shoot the iron sights. 4 weeks later, he says, Young, can I revisit it? He is one of the biggest proponent of red dot optics on a pistol now. Very proficient shooter. His eyes no longer have issues with seeing 3 dots. He only sees 1 dot. So you can cure a lot of the issues that you're having with your eyes by training, especially when you do transition work, back and forth between multiple targets or moving targets. Your muscles kind kind of conform to seeing the dot. And because, our brain is what's generating the image, just the pathway of the eyeball, and brain creates that image for you. So, and you can train your brain to see things in a proper way, proper manner. So you just got to give it a chance. Some people, you got to give it a lot longer than the others. Yeah.
Let me tell you something. So You're going to think I'm crazy here. So I've been shooting the dot since 2018. That was the transition. Once I could carry it at work, I started competing with it as well. And I love it. And I'm not going to give it up per se, but for competition, I am going back to production. I'm putting, taking a different slide and putting it back on my gray gun slide. I'm putting that back on to my my X5, and I'm going to be. I did some playing around with my contacts, my visions, because my dominant eye was set to pretty much infinity for the dot, and then I had close up, and I kind of brought it back so I can now see the front sight. But I tell you what's interesting is I'm shooting it almost like I'm still shooting the dot. I'm not going back to the way I was shooting irons before. I'm shooting it like a dot. But I mean, maybe I'm a little crazy. But I think part of it is that everyone is now shooting with a dot. And I'm like, okay, if that's what you want to do. But but am I? You think I'm crazy for doing this?
No, I don't think so. I think you basically learned how to efficiently target focus with the iron sight in some ways, right? Being more efficient kinesthetically in connection to the gun, because the red dot shows you that you can't do it. I think it's fine. I think if you go back and forth, there's not an issue. I think if you start with the dot and go to iron sight, you will shoot that iron sight more efficiently. Without having to be stuck with that front sight focus only. You can actually see the target with indirect vision. You can actually see more of the front sight and blurry rear sight. You can see it. And I think there's some people who get confused between seeing and focusing. You see even really great shooters have said things like, "Oh, our focus on the sight at a certain distance," that kind of stuff. And it may be true, but most of the time what's happening there is they're waiting and allowing the brain to see more of the sight, or a little bit more definition of the sight with indirect vision, because your brain is creating that picture. So if you wait, by the nature of the fact that the target is longer or farther away, and you have to center it, it takes time. So while you're doing that, your brain has ability to superimpose the sights on that target while you keep your eyes centered on the target. So I think there's sometimes shooters tend to use improperly, if you will, the term focus versus seeing. There are people that, most of them, that actually target focus everything. But sometimes they say things like, well, I focus on the target at really far distance. But they may not be. It's just maybe the perception of the brain that they're doing that. Because if you do switch back and forth, that causes issues, because now you're kind of using different part of the brain. Also, you're losing track of where the center of the target is. So at all distance, it really is better to target focus, even with iron sights. You just got to give a chance for your brain to see more of the sight. And the better you get at it, the more and more sight you can see. Even you're not focusing on it. You're focusing on the target, but you can see more of the sight. I mean, when I first target focusing, the target sight was like doubled and blurred, all kind of weird stuff. Now, when I target focus with our sights, it's just fuzzy sight that I can see the top edges, not perfectly, but good enough where I can see even at long distance where those three blades are. Now, what's interesting is that when I move the gun over to the left, my left eye, I can't do that very well because my brain hasn't learned it with my left eye. So if I train that with my left eye, I could probably do a lot easier. Now, monovision target focusing is even easier. So like when you do target focus with your, let's say strong hand only, stare at the target. You don't get that double vision of the front sight. So target focus training, if you really want to see what it should look like with two eyes, if you do with one eye or one hand, just like punch out forward like this, where you can see, look through the sight at the target, you can actually see what you should be seeing with two eyes. So target focusing with one hand is really easy. And if you look back into the days of like Rex Applegate, all these guys, they were doing the punch, the crouch and the punch, right? Fairbairn, all those guys, they were doing those. And I think the reason they're doing it is because they can target focus really easy. The problem was they couldn't manage the recoil very well. So they're, losing out to the two-handed shooting. But in terms of target focus, it's really easy with one hand shooting. But if you get that visual and transition to two hands, you can have the same picture of what you're looking at. I know I'm kind of getting specific now, but
no, that's good. I mean, specificity is probably what some people are tuning in to hear, especially if there's someone like me who's trying to pick your brain because I want to shoot my irons again. And I will, think that it's an interesting experiment, that's for sure. Because like I said, I'm shooting my irons much different now that I went to the dot. Would you start people off on a dot, or will you still start people off on irons?
always on the dot. You can go back to irons from the dot a lot easier than the other way around. Just because, like if I was teaching and I had 100% control, when I was in law enforcement, I didn't have 100% control because no matter what I taught them, when they go to the academy, they get infected. They're doing hard front sight focus and pinning the trigger. And they do that for 6 months. They come back and I have to train it out of them. And some of them I lose because they don't want to change. They want to stay exactly what they're comfortable with. A lot of people go, well, I don't care. I just want to be good enough, so they don't want to change. And there's some, or at least half or so, that really understands that in combatives now, you really can't do that. It's just not going to work out very well. You're panic shoot because you can't see the front sight or focus on the front sight. You can see him probably, not focus on it. And now you're lost. You've never done it before. You don't want to do it when somebody's trying to kill you. You want to practice that when you're not going to die, like in the range with sims, and understand that it doesn't work or it does work. And also you have to convince yourself, right? Part of it is you have to convince yourself that that is the right path, and your body and mind will accept it and you will get better. So half the battle with me is convincing the students, whether they're instructors or not, they're just SWAT operators or officers in the street or even civilians. Half the battle is trying to convince them. My brother-in-law never shot a handgun before. And, he's hunted with rifles, but not handgun, never shot a handgun. Well, I had 2 hours to train him for self-defense. And at the time he was, I think 29 and never shot a handgun. I bought him a P320, just a 4.7 inch P320, a stock trigger and everything else, stock iron sights. And in 2 hours, he can hit the center mass about 4-inch group at 15 yards, 1 round per second, and hit without the 4-inch group at 15 yards on a center mass of USPSA metric target without any low left, low, high, right, dead center. And this is what I told them. I said, look through the iron sights on the rear notch. Look through it. Make sure the front sight is in the notch. Stare at the target where you want to shoot. Focus on that. Look through the sight. Don't move the gun. Squeeze the trigger and let go. Don't hold it. Real simple instructions. And he doesn't know any better. And he's hitting 1 round per second without any issues on the grouping. There's nothing leaving that group. No low left, the dreaded low left. He's a right-hander. And he doesn't know any better. And he's like, oh, okay, this is great. But he doesn't know how good that is. Just think about that. In 2 hours, somebody who's never shot a handgun is hitting 4-inch group, 1 round per second, 15 yards. So whenever I have a student that never shot a handgun before, I'm like, let's go, because my job is so easy. When they tell me, usually what they tell me is, I wanted to be really good at shooting. So my friends took me out and we shot like 300 rounds. Struggle for that person and struggle for me, because now I have to teach them everything out of their brain. And once it gets in there, it doesn't want to come out. So you got to train that out and start over. So there's a lot of work. So I'd rather have a student that we really haven't shot a lot, or if at all. Anyway, I kind of got
you're competing. It's okay. You're competing, and you used to shoot with me the SIG 320 for many years. I still shoot a SIG 320 X5. You now are shooting, or back to shooting, your Tanfoglio with an optic on it. Why the change?
Well, I shot the CZ and Tanfoglio, Glock, MMP, USP, you name it. I shot it all in production. So I had all these guns sitting in the safe. And in 2014, I put them all down for P320. So I've been shooting the P320 for like 8 years straight. I needed a little bit of change. I love the gun. It shoots great. But I was like, well, these safe queens, I want to see what I can do with them. And probably shouldn't have done it, because, I'm cracking optics, getting light hits, that kind of stuff. When it does work, it's about, I would say, about the same as my P320 that I have. It's just different because it's heavy, and I don't have to really grip hard at all. It's just something different. No, I haven't put down the P320 forever. It's just temporary. Those who knew me, 10 years ago, they always complain. He goes, you shooting a different gun again? That kind of stuff. I just want to make sure that I'm proficient with various different platforms. Double, single, striker fired, light gun, heavy gun, because as far as what I was been doing since the retirement is, I in 2020, I think it was in the spring, I said, okay, it's enough of this master stuff. Time to go GM. So I started dry firing a lot, and I made GM in 2020 in carry optics. So that was my 5th GM in carry optics. And then, I've been busy with my life, and I hadn't really shot that much. And then I found out they moved the Area 1 from Washington State to Nampa, Idaho. It's just about 40-minute drive from me. So I was like, man, that's my backyard. I'm busy, but I need to go shoot that. So I picked up my your standard P320 RX, the one that Bruce Gray of Gray Guns set up for me, the upper. He set that up for me in 2016 when carry optic was first coming to USPSA, and that same one with the Romeo 1 and 6 MOA, and then with gray guns lower. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to practice much. I had about 3 weeks. So what I did was I dry fired in the morning. I got up, I dry fired for an hour while everybody else is sleeping. At night, about 10 o'clock before when everybody went to sleep, I dry fire. Transitions, distance change-ups with mini targets, trigger drills, and I just want to see what I can do. Just dry firing for 3 weeks, every day, morning and night. And I won carry optics at Area 1 in 2020 using just RXP. There's no heavy weights on it or anything. Standard grip with the grit job that I did on it, a gray guns trigger, and I just made sure I got. My goal was to just shoot as accurate as I can without thinking. Met my goal, and then I won. So since then, so a couple of years, the carry optics competition's gone nuts. If you've noticed, I mean, local matches like in Washington, they have 100 people show up, 65 are in carry optics. The guys that who used to be C, B class are now master class. Some, I think there's like a GM, and they're just shooting at a high level. Same thing here in Idaho. Everybody's starting to elevate.
Well, do you think, and I can't remember, maybe someone in the chat knows, but did limited optics pass? Is that now going to be a thing?
I don't think that's been finalized yet, right?
I know that they did a survey for the membership of USPSA, and they wanted to know, and I thought that it was going to be over like January 30th or January 31st, and then they're going to make a decision. So maybe they haven't made a decision because I haven't seen anything blowing up on my Instagram or my Facebook page yet about it. Usually the people come out in droves. But that's an interesting thing, limited. I know a lot of people want to shoot limited optics. Is that something that you're going to shoot?
Not sure, because I still have some unfinished business with carry optics. I can certainly do it. I mean, if you think about it, I just take my tanfoil, shoot a single action, and put a mag wall on it. Then I won't have to worry about the light hits. It always happens on the double action, with a short stroking tanfoil. So I just work the safety and same gear, and I probably do it that way. It's interesting what's going to happen to other divisions like production and limited when limited optics comes it's a thing. It'll be really interesting. I mean, it could eat away at the limited, and production in Idaho is dead anyway. You don't have anybody shooting production here. It's
Which
like
is
one
too
person.
Bad.
It is. I mean, USPSA should have made that high capacity production division a long time ago, like we've been asking.
I hope they do that. I hope in order to keep production, and for people that don't know what production is, that's basically somewhat stock. I mean, they've kind of modified it so you can have heavier guns and tungsten rods and all sorts of different modifications to it. But it's still
weapon mounted light,
right, weapon mounted lights. It's still supposed to be the average person who wants to come out and shoot competition can still go out and shoot competition without having to get all the race type stuff on it. The optic on the gun is not really a race stuff, and because most guns now come in with optics or optic ready. That's the deal. But I think they need to get production to a 15 round capacity at a bare minimum. I hope that they do that. And I casually saw that there wasn't a decision yet in the limited optics, but if I'm a betting man, I think that's going to pass. I think so. Many people want it.
I think initially it's going to be people are going to jump on it. So after a year, I'm not sure. Are they going to settle in carry optics or continue on with limited optics? I'm not sure. Maybe because they invest the money, they will. Yeah, I mean, initially when people first start talking about it a few years ago, whining about it, a lot of people are whining about, well, why can't we have, 2011s, those type of guns with optic? Well, you can, be an open shoot, an open division. And frankly, I used to be really irritated about it, but now I'm like, let's do it. I think it's like free market. If there's no demand for it, it's going to die. I don't think it's going to die, but let's try it. And then you can certainly shoot that with guns like Tamfo and CZ anyway. Just shoot a single action magwell. So maybe either chip away at the carry optics as well, maybe. So maybe either kind of be half and half. Don't know. So, but it's worth a try.
The last thing I want to bring up before we take some questions is trigger. You kind of mentioned you were doing some trigger drills in your dry fire. To this day, watching your videos, and I highly suggest that people follow Wiley GM. That's YLEEGM up on Instagram, so you can see Yong shooting. He's shooting super fast. It's amazing to watch how fast you can work that trigger and get those splits. I know splits aren't everything. It's all about efficiency. But still, to this day, that's definitely a signature of Yong Lee, is how fast you pull the trigger. How are you getting that kind of trigger speed?
A couple of things. One is the training methodology that I have. I believe the trigger speed doesn't come necessarily from how fast you press the trigger. It comes from how fast you release the trigger. So when I work on my trigger drills, I work on releasing as fast as I can, because pressing takes a lot less effort, because your finger is designed to just go like this, but not backwards. So if you can really release fast, another thing that happens is then now as the trigger comes back onto your finger and the recoil, and if you have a relaxed hand, relaxed finger, the recoiling of the slide, the gun, with releasing fast, trigger hits it, and now you get like sort of a bonfire, controlled bonfire. So, not everybody can sit there and do 10 rounds like in 1 second. But you notice a lot of people can do 2-3 rounds super fast because they're able to control the bonfire. So when you experiment, you want to really go out there and see, are you really pulling the trigger of 11 splits? Or are you just relaxing and letting the gun do that for you? I think it's the latter. I think the gun is doing it for you. But if you're stiff on the trigger finger, it will not happen. It just stays there. Trigger hits it and it just stays there. So you want to really relax the finger. So I practiced a lot of not gripping so hard, but just really gripping hard with this one, locking the wrist. I used mostly wrist. Now that I'm older and my strength is not as good as it used to be, or consistent. So what I do now is I'm really, if you will, master the wrist locking so that I don't allow the wrist to move. So if you lock the wrist and don't allow the wrist to move, then I can relax this hand altogether and work the trigger super fast, releasing fast primarily. And then the trigger will hit the finger, and the recoil in conjunction, you can really work that trigger. Whenever I'm have tension and I start cranking on the finger, my trigger speed's gone. Whenever I'm relaxed, it's doing the splits. So fast splits. So what I try to do when I want to shoot fast, try not to think and relax. just relax my body, lock the wrists together really tight so the wrist doesn't move. And there's various ways people do the wrist locking. I do it by, pushing forward and pushing like this, right? I think JJ Rakaza has something similar, and I think Robert Vogel also. But I do it not just with my hand, but I do it just by moving my elbow up a little bit. You see? I just lock it in like that and forward so that it locks everything in like that. And make sure to bend the elbow so it doesn't have you going back and forth like that, right? The recoil pulse is going through the elbow, through your shoulder, off your back. So you really want to bend the elbow slightly, but lock the wrist. Don't let it move. And along with letting go fast and relaxing the hand. So I think those are the key. I think most people can have fast trigger finger if they apply that principle. But what I see is that they're so stuck on gripping really hard like this. So now they can't release the trigger. Not being able to release the trigger is a problem when you're trying to shoot fast.
So if people want to train with you, what is the best way to do this? Because obviously, and I don't even know if you're doing online training like a lot of instructors are doing because you're way out in the West Coast. But how do people train with you other than listening to your mini lectures that we're getting here?
You mean the non law enforcement you're talking about?
Well, both law enforcement and non-law enforcement. Because I know your pistol optics class is primarily, like you said, for law enforcement. So how do any other people?
Yeah, I normally do law enforcement classes. That's where my passion is because I'm trying to still get back to the law enforcement community. But I am willing to do civilian classes. I get sometimes I get requests through social media like Instagram, Facebook. But you can always get a hold of me, YLEEGM, and my Instagram and Facebook. You can get a hold of me that way. Email is connected to those. So YLEEGM@gmail.com. So through Gmail, just you can just, if there's a range and if there's enough interest, I'd be willing to do the class. But like I said, my passion is still law enforcement and combatives, treating people in the way they succeed in combat. That's my primary interest, though that does translate to competition because there are a lot of correlation between the two. But combatives is what I've been studying and training for.
Awesome. Well, I think we're ready to answer some questions. Let's take a look. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in. And I know we've got some favorites in here. I know Bobby McGee has been patiently waiting here. And I don't even know if he has any questions, but he's definitely been your champion in the chat. And Bobby, thank you for coming on. One of these days, I will want to talk to you. So just be prepared for that. So let's take a look here. And, Steve-O, he was in your Homestead class. He also retired. And it's good to see him because once he retired, he moved out. But he had a question. Do you like a big dot or a small MOA?
It's changed. When I was younger, I prefer the 3. But unfortunately, I still have pretty decent eyesight. But, it's faded. You know what I mean, right? When you go to the restaurant and they got the nice mood light with candle light, can't see the menu, right? So then you bring out your tactical light and people think you're a moron. But it's faded. So I need a brighter dot than before. So you can do the 3 MOA really bright, but it tends to glare off the edges a little bit, especially against the sun. So I right now I like really crisp 6 MOA, but I'm even thinking about 8 in the future, because as my eyes fade, because I'm getting older, I try to reinvent myself every few years, because what I realize as I get older, what I can do before, I can't do now very well. So I have to kind of relearn how to shoot, how to see the dot a little bit differently, maybe a little bit brighter, maybe a little bit bigger. Hopefully I don't have to go to like a 12 or something eventually. But 6 seems to be really good for most people, because you don't want to strain to see the dot, right? It's got to be subconscious. So you want to be monitoring the dot without having to strain for it, so you don't want to lose it during transitions and stuff like that, right? So younger people, more power to you. If you can see the 3 MOA really well, probably works better, because you can see the target more, right? You can see more of the targeting area. So small dot is probably better for them. I always liked the 3 when I was younger, but I like the 6 now that I'm older.
Bobby McGee says that he is staying in production. Great. So I will be seeing Bobby at the matches, and I'll be chasing his tails, hopefully. If
you guys shooting in the same range?
No,
same matches?
not at all. But I will find him at nationals. I'll
I
seek him
see.
out.
Yeah, because he's in
If I
Florida
make
now.
it to national. Oh, he is in
kind
Florida?
of lower. Yeah, but he's I forget the name of it. Small city by the water.
Volusia County?
I forget. Yeah,
St.
he's
Augustine?
in. You have to ask him.
All right, Bobby, if you're still on, just let us know where you are so I can avoid you at the area match. Leonard says, splits get chicks. Did you find that having splits help you get married? Because I know it's probably a turn on for a lot of people.
I have to ask Mikey. She's not that impressed with my shooting, though. She likes watching Anthony Felder, and I say, why do you just watch him shoot? Well, he said, well, it's like watching the big screen. I go, what do you mean? Well, he's 6'3", 275. I can see what he's doing a lot better. So I don't impress her when I'm shooting. She says she's impressed, but she's like, okay. But she did get really happy and run around the range screaming when she beat me on the stage one year.
Nice.
Well, she's the most accurate person I know. She's just all alphas, In a local match, she shoot about 3 Charlies entire match. So always. So she's I'm trying to get her to shoot a little faster. She goes, how do I get out of B class? I go, well, you're going to have to shoot faster. Okay. He says, if you put in the work, I can be GM, right? So meaning me, I put the work in, then she could be a GM, helping her. So we'll be training this year. Good times here in Idaho. She loves it here. I love it here. It's still America here,
That's great. Guys, if you still have any questions, get them out before we disconnect. Steve, again, says that don't let the ATF hear that you're bum firing a handgun because they'll ban you. That's going to be the new one. Bump stocks.
Exactly.
Bump fired guns, and then the pistol braces, and now the Yong Lees. Your fingers will be banned.
The trigger.
Yes.
Finger.
Yes. And Bobby says that he's in Fernandina Beach. I'll have to look that one up. I've lived here for a while, but I've never been there, so I'll have to look that one up. But he is then obviously in Florida, and the great state of Florida. So our shooting has, since when I first started shooting, it's gotten so much better, not just in terms of the caliber of shooters, but in terms of ranges and matches and all sorts of things that are going on. And I don't know, did you see that new thing that came out? I think it was announced today, the Shoot Sig competition. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think so.
They announced it at SHOT Show. I heard rumblings about it, and then it just hit the social media today. Basically, you sign up for the membership at SIG, and I might be butchering all this, but you sign up for the membership. It's like $50 a year. You shoot a match, and I guess they have these kind of how like Glock has their challenges. Their matches, the GSSF matches.
Yes,
Well, they're kind of doing
yeah.
the same thing, and then you get like guns. You get a discount on a gun when you sign up,
Oh.
and then you can win guns, and then you could be put in drawings for guns. Again, a la like how GSSF is run.
Oh, that's great.
So I think it's interesting. But yeah,
That is it.
it's shootsig.com. I'll definitely be checking that out.
Definitely.
But anyways, I want to thank Yong for coming on tonight and being part of the great Firearms Nation. And I'll link everything down below in the show notes. And thank you for coming on.